Sam, and I'm talking about the current Jupiter-Rahu approaching conjunction. Actually, it's very close in the sky right now, with Rahu at about 1.5 degrees, getting closer to 0 Leo and going into Leo on January 9th. And Jupiter is like stopped at the very end of Leo right now. It's basically stationary retrograde. So they're very close in the sky, just a couple degrees, and we're seeing Jupiter-Rahu themes sort of getting, sort of coming together. It's going to be quite a transit. What's going to happen is, what's happening is Jupiter has been going forward in Leo, and it's kind of stopped right now. Like, it's been going like this, and then it sort of slows down as Rahu goes here. Then Rahu is going to join, and then they're both going to go like this for a couple months. And then Rahu will go like this and pass, and then, and then Jupiter will go like this and pass, and then Jupiter will leave Leo August 11th, I believe is what it is. So what's happening right now is they're going like this. And Jupiter's about stopped, and Rahu is about right here. Then they're going to go, ooh, clunk. So it'll happen at like the very last degrees of Leo, like 29 Leo, is where they're going to sort of hang out, and they're going to go back through a good part of the spring. So what does this mean? Well, for world events and other things, we can expect some, unusual leaders to emerge, or some strange shifts to happen with certain leaders. There's been a lot of unusual political situations, obviously, here in the United States, and it's kind of taken over sort of world politics a little bit now also, this whole Donald Trump phenomena, and his sort of bombastic rhetoric where there seems to be no rules because of the being politically incorrect and all of that stuff that has garnered a certain amount of support in his base, or in the Republicans, and it's filtering out, through the world, where even, British Prime Minister speaking out against it, and his people from his own party and all this, but yet there's a certain amount of support. You get Rahu and Jupiter now are going to be in his first house, and they're going to go retrograde. With Jupiter going retrograde, you might see some of this start to shift a little bit, particularly with Rahu also there. It could also sort of conflate the whole thing quite a bit more, not just around Trump, but around the other political candidates, at least on that side, and also in the Democratic side, where you might start to see some real contentiousness. This is going to coincide with the primary season in the United States, where it's not only Donald Trump and like a bunch of other Republicans, but there's also Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. So there's going to be a lot of this, and these are happening in Leo, okay, which is the sign of the government and of power, centralized power. This is what Leo is, and it's not just the government, it's not just governments, but it's also the centralized power in you. It's your consistent vision. Hopefully you have a consistent vision. If you don't have a consistent vision, then the part of you that is related to Leo suffers. You lose sight of where you're going. You lose track. You get off course. So if you're not driven by a purpose, by a purposeful vision, a consistent vision, then you get knocked around by other people's agendas, and you're reacting to what other people want for you rather than living your vision, living your power. So this is the quality of the sun, and when planets go into Leo, they're trying to act from that place. And so, the way we assess that month to month, because the sun is a monthly transit, is we see however much that planet in Leo is going to be, somewhat aligned with that vision, often depending on where the sun is, because the sun is the ruler. So what we're going to be seeing is, the sun is going to be going through Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces during much of that time. Also Aries. But beyond that sort of, changeability every 30 days or so, what we're going to see is the influence of Rahu onto Jupiter. Rahu creates a sort of desire to expand things very quickly, but a sort of vision for the future often, but not a capacity to really, necessarily hold on to it in the present. So, for example, one of the things that just happened is we just had this rocket. Elon Musk's rocket just launched and came back down to Earth and landed. Very Rahu Jupiter sort of thing. Rahu is very much about space travel and technology expanding very quickly. Jupiter is about planes and rockets and space. Jupiter rules the element of space. So this is a very Rahu Jupiter thing. It also portends a future that's not here yet, but it inspires us toward a future that may include space travel and traveling up and looking out at the Earth from the ionosphere or the exosphere or the space station or something, right? Very Rahu Jupiter kind of thing just happened, for example. And so other kinds of remarkable breakthroughs can really take hold with a Rahu Jupiter conjunction. And I want you to understand, one of the things is usually when Rahu Jupiter get close to each other, they just pass each other. It's usually like, okay, goodbye, boom, and they pass. They're gonna dance together for months like this, within a couple degrees of each other for most of it. So this is going to be a protracted Jupiter-Rahu retrograde. Obviously, Rahu is always retrograde, but Jupiter retrograde with Rahu tracking right next to it. So what the retrograde Jupiter does is it's a time for us to reflect on what's inspiring us. Jupiter's about inspirations. It's been in Leo since the middle of the summer, and that's about, as I said, Leo is about authentic vision and solid and consistent vision that illuminates our path. And Jupiter is about what inspires us and motivates us. So, the consistent vision of Leo and the inspiration of Jupiter, you can see why this is a good transit. So it's been a good time for people to really pursue something that inspires them, that they also want to bring into their life, like as a central theme in their life. Like the centralized power in their life, which is Leo, is something that's inspiring, related to gurus and teachers and all these kinds of things, is certainly part of it. But even things like it's a great time to accumulate wealth. We've seen the stock market really improve in the U.S. since Jupiter went into Leo, for example. And, so with Rahu tracking it, when Jupiter goes retrograde, we reflect on those things. Oh, are these things really inspiring? Is this really where I want to be led? Because Jupiter's also where we want to be led. And I will say, especially like with the emergence of figures like Trump and other kind of confusing rhetoric, leaders that are sort of bombastic, even Putin, who has been enjoying kind of a renaissance in the world on some level because he's tough, these sort of leaders and these things that have been sort of simply tough on some kind of basic level, we might see a shift here, a kind of shifting of the story, especially with Rahu also tracking there. And one of the things I also want to mention about Rahu Jupiter, which I think is definitely possible, is, with Jupiter, when we bring these qualities of Leo and we have this Jupiter, which can really make big things, and Rahu, which also makes things sudden and even explosive. There could be, I think there's a possibility of things that may be somewhat dark and sinister, like maybe the potential for assassinations or other kinds of danger, especially for people who have power, who are exploiting power, who are just exploiting people through their, power. So certain figures, certain people need to be careful. I definitely think Rahu Jupiter has a potential for a kind of explosive, shocking event. This could also relate to things like other terrorist events or other things that shift public opinion against someone, or someone, used for or against someone. Those who have been, let's say, using propaganda or demagoguery or manipulating power may find a correction, either by consensus, by falling out of favor with, even those who have been praising them. Again, because we're reevaluating what's inspiring us. And it's not just Republican Donald Trump or whatever. It's not just that. Because there are others that are, in some ways, as implicated in demagoguery or in just simplifying, a matter of policy is just attack the other side. Like, that's the policy. Attack everybody else. From the Republican point of view, it's like repeal Obamacare, bomb everybody, do nothing Obama or the Democrats ever did was right, and that's my policy. That kind of just demagoguery doesn't really, you may find a reversal of that, and maybe some more mainstream, thoughtful views may take hold. And same way on the Democratic side. Clinton's policies and Bernie Sanders, people that idolize Bernie Sanders so much may also start going, you know what? There's some problems with him as well. So, and again, some of his policies could really be revised and looked at, policies about guns or other kinds of things that maybe just aren't really workable. This is I'm using an American political model, but look in your life as well for things that show where, demagoguery is something where instead of looking at elegant solutions to subtle problems, we look for something simple and we kind of fixate and polarize, and rather than, actually spend the time to learn something well or work on something well, we get disgusted with something because it's not what we thought it was. Again, this can be very, prominent when you get Jupiter in Leo. One of the things that I predicted back in the summer is that when Jupiter went into Leo, there would be a conservative backlash against some of the very liberal things that had happened earlier in the summer. Like in the United States, we had the Supreme Court ratify same-sex marriage. We also had something that there was a moment where we repealed, or where the Confederate flag was taken down in, I believe it was South Carolina, and things that really kind of said, we're a progressive society and we're for inclusion, and these kinds of things happen right when Jupiter and Venus were joined in Cancer, and Jupiter was right at the end of Cancer and about to go into Leo. At the time when Jupiter went into Leo, you could see it on the webinar that I did, I said we're going to have a conservative backlash against those things. Boy, as soon as it happened very early, you had this emergence of Trump with very conservative ideas about immigrants and all kinds of other things, and backlash against political correctness. All of this falls into the rubric of political correctness. For those who live in the U.S., this is a real, common theme right now, and it kind of justifies any sort of belligerence almost at this point. There's almost nothing too belligerent that you can't swat away by saying, well, there's nothing wrong with that, you're just being politically correct. So, okay. But again, we may start to see a backlash against that sort of conservatism on that level. And I'm not just saying it's conservative Americans or whatever, that it's just a conservative party, but I mean a backlash against what is truly a problem with a certain amount of political correctness. It is true. It is an issue. And it cuts in many different ways. But sacrificing those more elegant things, because political correctness is a matter of style. It's a matter of nuance. It's a matter of, saying African Americans instead of blacks, if that's what they want to be, called. It's a matter of, let's say, like, for instance, there's a thing where, sports teams, it's becoming not politically correct to call them things like Redskins or Indians or other things. But, whether it's an issue or not, this is a nuance. This is what political correctness is about. It's a way to try to accommodate people, but it also becomes a very sort of dumbing down of specificity when it's taken too far. Rather than being able to say something like, death, we say passing away, right? George Carlin had a lot to say about the dumbing down of language. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, it's, you say something like, mistakes were made. Well, okay. But who made them, right? So this is a type of political correctness which erodes honesty. So a backlash against political correctness is totally legit. But it can also be used to manipulate and coerce as well. So this is a little bit of a speech about that. The reason I'm saying it is because these are subtle themes, and we've seen this. It's no question that at least in the West, at least in the U.S., political correctness and as a sword has been a huge issue since Jupiter went into Leo. And again, we may start revisiting some of this when Jupiter goes retrograde, especially Rahu is there. We might start saying, well, wait a minute, it's not really politically correct to call someone out for insulting somebody or whatever it is. And really looking at those kinds of things that are now very prominent since Jupiter went into Leo. So look in your life as well. I mean, this is, as I often do in these forecasts, I talk about the personal, I also talk about the social, because we do live in a world that's dominated by events as well. I definitely found that rocket launch, there's a lot of inspiration with Jupiter going through Leo as well. That's happened since the summer, and the retrograde has a lot of potential for us to really be rethinking some rigid approaches to how we've been looking at things. And it's been a lot of heavy energy. We've had Mars, Rahu in Virgo, and we had Mars, Rahu in Virgo for a long time, and Saturn, Sun in Scorpio. Often, or for much of that, it was also with Mercury, so there was a lot of dark, heavy energy for about a month when we had these terrorist attacks and then this very dark rhetoric and fear around it. A lot of that energy is shifting now, and we're going to have some big shifts next year as well, starting with this Rahu Jupiter in early January. And so, it could show, those sort of explosive terrorist kind of events that are going to reverse the dialogue, change the dialogue, and we're going to be challenged to embrace an ideology of inclusion or of rigidity in the name of things like political correctness or expediency. One of the problems with signs like Leo, which is a fire sign, and planets like Jupiter, which is fiery, is we often want to shortcut intelligence. And I mean intelligence in the sense of understanding the nuance of a situation and negotiating, which is Mercury-Venus stuff, with ideology and dogma and demagoguery. It's much easier. We tend to feel much better about being able to just demagogue something and say, it's simple. They're the bad ones. This is it. And my mind is made up, and that's it. It could be very much the negative quality of Jupiter in Leo if we don't have good data and we don't think things through correctly. So these are questions that the world is facing right now. Rahu Jupiter, Rahu is going to blow it up a little bit. And like we just saw, though, as a good foreshadowing, this is my sort of prediction a little bit, is that we're going to make some corrections, because Jupiter tends to correct a little bit of what the retrograde tends to correct some of the excesses of what happened during his direct motion. So some of these excesses in, falling into, falling prey to demagoguery or to wanting to make things easier or that sort of thing, I have a feeling is going to get corrected somewhat. I think we're going to really relax that and open that up a little bit more, because of something shocking that may happen, that may force us to do it. And I look at the success of this rocket as a kind of foreshadowing of that, because it's very much a Rahu-Jupiter thing. And the last couple times they fired off the rockets exploded. They weren't able to land them again. So the success of this shows, yes, there's great possibility. And it's very much Rahu too, because it's something that we can sense that's coming. This hopeful thing that's coming, but it's not here yet. Very much Rahu. And also, when the planet is retrograde, like Jupiter will be, he's closer to the Earth. So again, I am a Vedic astrologer, and retrograde is not bad. Okay? It shows things backing up and reversing, and us really getting acquainted with that thing on an internal level quite a bit more, rather than fixating on the outer result. We tend to fixate on the thing I want, and when I get it, it's good, even if it wasn't something that was good for me. If I get it, it's good. We never think that not getting something is also good, because it allows us to then really introspect about it. Like it might be good to fantasize about a President Trump or a President Clinton or a President Sanders or whatever, but maybe we'll have an opportunity to really reflect and say, would that really be the best thing? or President Cruz or whoever the other ones are. So the retrograde, we reflect on that thing a lot more. And Rahu like explodes it like, oh, I don't know. You know, so I'm looking forward to that transit. It's going to happen from January 2016, January 9th. Rahu goes into Leo, joins Jupiter right there. And basically Rahu and Jupiter will be in Leo until August 11th. But through much of the spring, they'll be very close together until Jupiter turns direct. So, anyway, I hope this was helpful.